You are now listening to TheGrio's Black Podcast Network, Black Culture Amplified.
My name is Michael Harriot. I'm your favorite Wypipologist, and I'm here every day to tell you about what's going on in the village. But, TheGrio, we really do believe in diversity and inclusion. And that's why we have White People Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, we dedicate to our favorite white subject. We explore the world that is whiteness, because this podcast would never exclude a group based on color, creed, or race, or how they season their food. We would never do that. And so today is White People Wednesday, when we explore what's going on in the white jungle out there. Today's class is a class in Wypipology. Now, I know a lot of you have heard me call myself a Wypipologist and wonder, what does that mean? Well, today we're going to explain that in a class called Wypipology 101. I'm Michael Harriot, world famous Wypipologist, and this is TheGrio Daily. I know you're wondering, what the hell is Wypipology? Well, Dictionary.com and Urban Dictionary both define Wypipologist as a humorous slang term for someone, usually a black person, who studies white people or white people. White people, after all, do some crazy stuff in need of expert explanation. While Dictionary.com mentions who is responsible for coming up with this term, like some dude named Michael Harriot, they kind of got it wrong. And let me explain. See, I was raised in a majority black neighborhood and a majority black family. Yeah, I do have an aunt named Rebecca, so technically, there's a Becky in my family. I don't know how that happened. And I was homeschooled. So basically, until I was 12 years old, I was surrounded by blackness. And when I got into the American education system, my first teacher was a woman who lived around the corner from me named Miss Sellers. Miss Sellers was a miniature little black woman who always smelled a little bit like cinnamon candy cane and openly prayed for her students after the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And in case you're wondering, nope. Because of the public school system's astonishing lack of anointing oil, I only pledge allegiance to Jesus Christ, my King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the bright morning star, and Muhammad Ali. See, Miss Sellers, she had been teaching so long that she also taught my mother back in the day before schools in my hometown were integrated. Now, I should probably mention here that, my school district wasn't integrated until 1995. So, Miss Sellers, she somehow understood that I was a fish out of water, and she handled me with kid gloves. Now, I want to say that it was because she noticed so much potential in me, but let's be honest. I think it was because, aside from my friend Monique, I was the only black person in her class. And Monique, she was a tomboy, new to the school, and she lived a block away from me, so we became like best friends. Now, Monique's parents was in the military, so she had to go to a lot of schools. So she basically guided me through the American education system, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was homeschooled, remember? And we sat in the same row for every class, me in front and her behind me. Now, at my school, instead of changing classes, the students, they stayed in one class all day, and then the teachers, they switched classrooms. And Miss Branson, a young white lady, she taught us social studies every afternoon. And Miss Sellers, she held down the rest of the subjects. Now, even though other teachers came to our classrooms, like the art teacher and the music teacher, we were technically called Miss Sellers' class. So one day, as soon as Miss Branson walked into class, before Miss Sellers even had a chance to leave, from behind me, Monique mumbled just loud enough for me to hear, "Well, I guess it's time to learn what it was like before black people found out about America." And so, I had to crack a joke. I was like, white people think black people were invented in 1865. And I don't even know if Monique really got it, but she cracked up anyway. It was probably the words white people that made her, giggle behind me. But Miss Branson, she did not get it. She definitely heard it. And she says, "Hey, what did you say, Michael?" I was just clearing my throat, I was trying to think of something to say. And then I said it again. White people don't think black people were invented until 1865. Now, because I had spent the first decade of my life in a cocoon that left me unaffected by whiteness, I had never been concerned with whiteness. I never intentionally tried to make white friends because I didn't know no white people. My real education wasn't steeped in the narrative of white supremacy. The need for white people's acceptance or assimilations were concepts that had escaped my notice. It's not that I resisted them. I just didn't need to know about white people in my existence. So the blood was draining from her face, and she pulled out a discipline slip, and she accused me of using profane and inappropriate language. So, of course I protested. I was 2 years away from my Holy Ghost eligibility, so I knew I didn't say any demonic words. She didn't even try to explain what I did wrong. She just started yelling at me, accused me of insulting the entire class. Remember, me and Monique was the only black ones in the class. And then she demanded that I apologize. So I said, apologize to whom? For real though, I did say whom. I read a lot back then, so I did say whom. So I stood up and I said, apologize to whom? And she said, to the entire class and me. Apologize to her? I was like, for what? I ain't even do nothing. Now, this is where my upbringing got me in trouble. See, in a world fueled by logic and science and facts and, of course, the love and grace of Jesus, Ms. Branson had formed a sentence that, I'd never heard before, right? My mom, she always explained stuff to us, so I'd never heard anybody just tell me to do something because I said so. Because she said so. It was the most absurd collection of words I'd ever heard cobbled together in a subject and a predicate. I was like, hey, who do you think you are? Jesus? My mama? And then I refused, right? So now I admit this probably wasn't the best tactic, but to be fair, my conflict resolution experience was limited to, I ain't gonna do it no more when my mama started looking for her belt. Plus, this was the first time I'd seen a truly angry white person. So the fact that she was turning beet red didn't even register to me. It didn't even raise any red flags. And then, Miss Branson slapped me. She slapped me in front of the entire class. Now, it wasn't a pimp slap or nothing. It didn't even compare to that time my mama jacked me up in church because I had my eyes open during the altar call. But, Miss Branson, she was a small white woman, so I wasn't even mad or even hurt, which is why I had no idea why I started crying. I didn't even know what was going on. I had taken a butt whipping before, but they always made sense. The class was silent. My chest heaved, my eyes filled with water, and I tried to control my breathing to stop myself from crying. It didn't work. And then, out of nowhere, like Batman, Miss Sellers appeared. She lifted me in the air by the seat of my pants now. Look, I might not be remembering this correctly, but if I had to bet my entire 401k on this, I do have a 401k, right? I could almost guarantee that my feet never touched the ground until Miss Sellers deposited me outside the classroom. Now, I wish I had a transcript of the eloquent speech Miss Sellers gave me in the hallway of that elementary school. But she told me about how I must tiptoe around the feelings of white people because they are white people. And they will always do what white people do. She perfectly explained that all of the homeschooling, all the Holy Ghost, all the encyclopedia ingesting, the knowledge of self, the nonviolence resistance, the grade skipping, the smart mouthing, the entirety of my life's education meant nothing if I did not learn that existing in America is a lifelong exercise in knowing what you can't do as a Black person in America. I wish I could share her exact words, but I can't. Because for real, she didn't say any of that. She just stood there and she let me cry. Then she handed me a little tiny white handkerchief. And when I wiped the snot from my nose, because you be a little bit of snot be coming out when you cry real hard. She crouched down beside me. She just leaned into me and she said, "You cannot talk to them like that." I remember how she enunciated the two words, separating them into isolated sentences. Can not. Who? Like, I didn't know who she was talking about. And she said, white people. And she didn't even hug me or say anything sweet. She just walked back into the building with me until we reached her classroom. And after we stood there in silence, like the bell rang and we walked into the class and Miss Branson walked out of the class, Miss Sellers just watched quietly as I fulfilled my side of our bargain. Miss Branson, I'm sorry I made that joke. That's what I said. It was inappropriate and insulting to you, and it was insulting to my classmates. Now, in my head, I did it in exchange for Miss Sellers' love. And a couple of pieces of candy, because them old ladies always got that dope peppermint, that real strong, extra strength peppermint. But I couldn't understand why Miss Sellers thought it was important for me to do this. But, she got that good peppermint. It was the first time in my life that whiteness had penetrated my cocoon. So after school, like me and Monique and my sisters, Monique's brother Tony, and a couple of other black people who went to this school, we was walking back to our neighborhood, like on the black part of town. And, just out of nowhere, I just said, man, Miss Branson be tripping. Because I knew that Monique was going to talk about it. I knew that she was going to make some jokes. But she didn't even say anything because she was laughing so hard. I mean, she was laughing real hard, y'all. Like, she could barely breathe. For real, like, it was offensive. Like, I could have called the police. She was laughing so hard. And then slowly, with the skill of a griot, she started telling everybody how Miss Sellers snatched me up like a puppy, like what I said. And she started telling them how I got in trouble in class. And everybody wanted to know, but what did he say to Miss Branson? And Monique was like, I forget. Something about white people. And it's like, everybody stopped. You know how, like on the movies, the record scratched and the earth stopped spinning? Everyone in our little crew, everybody stopped walking. Their eyes got wide and they gasped, like if I called Mike Tyson's mama a bad word. They asked, like, if I said it out loud in front of the entire class. And I was like, yeah. Before that day, people had only looked at me one other time like that. That time I told my mama that Jesus probably didn't want us to go to church that much. But for a moment, it was a hush as all my little friends just stared at me. Then after a beat or two, Monique's brother Tony broke the silence. He was like, dang, Mikey, that was stupid. And that was the moment I became a Wypipologist. See, I realized that most black people, especially ones who weren't raised like me, they all have a subtle deference to white people. Now, that's not a criticism, because I know, that's how black people survived for 400 years. But I realized that I couldn't understand my place in society because I didn't know anything about black people. And no one knows white people like black people. Wypipology is the anthropological examination of the customs and habits of white people. See, if you survive in America, this is my belief for real, you have to know white people. And one of the things that I believe too, you can't understand racism, you can't understand white supremacy, you really can't understand America by studying black culture and black history, because black people didn't invent racism. White people did. Black people don't perpetuate racism. White people do. Black people didn't, for the most part, create the laws, the Constitution, the traditions, and the customs that govern our society. White people did that. And if you want to understand how that affects black people, you can't just study black people. You have to study white people because they are the ones who created all of these disparities. They are the ones that created all of the things inside the system that we are trying to dismantle. If you want to understand how the criminal justice system works, you can't just study the black people inside the criminal justice system. You got to understand why white people want us inside the criminal justice system. You got to understand why white people aren't arrested even though they commit the same kinds of crimes. For instance, white people use drugs more than black people, but black people are arrested at 3 times the rate of white people for drug use. Why is that? Well, you can't understand that by just looking at the people inside the criminal justice system. You got to look at the people who escape the problems of the criminal justice system and what makes them escape. It's whiteness. And that is why I'm a Wypipologist. Because to understand America, to understand racism, to understand white supremacy, and to understand how this entire thing works, we have to dedicate ourselves, not exclusively, but part of our education has to be in understanding why, when, where, and how white people manipulate this entire system to their advantage. And as always, turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, you need to listen to TheGrio Daily. We'll see you tomorrow. We out.
Thank you for listening to TheGrio Daily. If you liked what you heard, please give us a 5-star review, download the TheGrio app, subscribe to the show, and share it with everyone you know. Please email all questions, suggestions, and compliments to podcasts@thegrio.com. TheGrio Daily Podcast is an original production brought to you by TheGrio's Black Podcast Network.
You are now listening to TheGrio's Black Podcast Network, Black Culture Amplified. What's going on, everybody? Panama Jackson here, and I'm the host of the Dear Culture podcast on the TheGrio Black Podcast Network. And I'm telling you to check us out every Thursday on the TheGrio's app to make sure you get that new, amazing, original Black content, that awesome creativity. Check us out. Dear Culture, Panama Jackson, out.